It doesn't make a story less credible just because you did a paid format. You can post on social media and get organic clients, but you can also pay Facebook to get, clients a lot quicker. So it's about speed.
Getting on Forbes and getting on these things doesn't mean as much as it used to. Why should people get into PR still?
You still should get press because you still need to do the exact same thing with your audience. You can't just do it thinking that it's just going to be on a Forbes or entrepreneur thing alone.
Where do you think the future of media is going?
I think it's going to be...
Welcome back to the Wealthy Business Podcast. I'm your host, Javi Chavez. Today, I'm with the PR master, somebody who's been in the game for a very long time, helping people like Ed Milet. Who else have you helped out?
Brandon Dawson, Chandler Bolt, just to name a few.
Awesome. I'm with Ulyses Osuna. How you doing, man?
I appreciate it.
Cool. So, how does one get on these big publications? Because we were kind of talking before the podcast and getting on Forbes and getting on these things doesn't mean as much as it used to.
Yeah.
So, why should people get into PR still?
I think the biggest reason is there's a lot of people in the space right now that are just DMing. Like you said, you have like 10 DMs of people saying like, hey, get on Forbes, get on this, get on that. So it doesn't necessarily hold that much weight. But what people are looking for still is the kind of reaffirmation of like the beliefs. And Forbes used to do that for people, right?
Yeah.
I am credible. And because of that, people believe that because it was, from a third party. So you still should get press because you still need to do the exact same thing with your audience. It's just, you can't just do it thinking that it's just going to be on a Forbes or entrepreneur thing alone.
Got it. Okay. And so what does a modern PR strategy look like in 2024?
More of a holistic view of things, right? Like if you're noticing right now, there's like a lot of people doing podcasts and, speaking on stage, and that's very, very good. You want to encompass all of it. Like if you think about it, there's this thing called the VARK model, which is essentially different ways that people like to learn. Like for example, I like to read things. So every time somebody sends me a voice note, like I'll literally get it transcribed. Or if I have to watch a video, I'll get it transcribed because I like to read through things. That's the best way that I like to learn. And other people like to learn through video. Other people like to learn through audio. And other people like to learn through like kinesthetic, which is essentially in person, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about it, if you only do one of those areas, you're alienating everybody else that likes to learn a different way. So if you kind of incorporate the VARK model, which is, all forms of like the way that people learn, you can do audio, which is, podcasts or video as well. You can do written, which are the articles. You can do a lot of stuff. And naturally right now, people are not, reading the entire article. Like we do hundreds of articles a month and I don't read every single article or even the ones for me. Like I don't read them through, right? But what we do notice is people skim. So you want to be able to control what people skim. We have a saying at Influencer Press, it's like PR's organized truth. And if you essentially, control the narrative in a way that obviously is not, manipulative, but it's like ethical and you do it in a way that kind of, again, reaffirms the beliefs that you want people to have, then that's where the power lies. So.
100%. And that's kind of what we believe too. That's why we're so big on media in general, is because the more that people spend time with us, through podcasts or when we're on stage, or we don't do a lot of like written stuff. Like I think that's probably something that we could improve on as a company, is like just getting on more, of these press releases, getting like, even like our Twitter and our LinkedIn presence isn't as good as it probably could be.
Yeah.
Like we're working on it, but like obviously we crush video because a lot of people, that's how they consume. Like you said, through audio, through, the YouTube channels and stuff like that. And then, if we get somebody to hang out with us for like an hour, the likelihood of them wanting, or of them knowing, liking, trusting us just goes up significantly. Yeah. So, how do you, get people on these stages? Like, 'cause that's like a hard thing to do.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of lucky because as a PR agency, like one of the things that we do or that we have is like leverage that other people don't. And where a lot of people get it wrong is that they feel entitled that they should be on that stage. I'm this person, and because of that, like you should have me, and that's kind of where the biggest issue lies. Because normally when somebody's throwing an event, they already know what kind of speakers that they want for the event, or they know the people that they want to have speak at this event. So when you're pitching somebody, you have to then convince them that they should have you versus the people that they already had in their mind.
100%, yeah.
So that means you have to come to the table with something. So for us, because we're a PR agency, well, we come to the table with PR. So the way that we get our clients on stages is we make it a win-win for the event and for our client. So we say, to the event organizer, like, hey, we'd love to get a client on stage. He's been on these stages before, whatever. And because of that, we'd be more than happy to get every single, person that is speaking on that stage press, or we can get the event press, or we can do, the founder, we can get him press. Like we come to the table with something instead of just hoping that, the name alone will essentially get them through the door.
That's huge. And I think that's important for any negotiation, just in life in general. It's like come to the table with something of value and people are going to be way more willing to transact with you. I mean, and it's funny because the way you mentioned that, and when you DM'd me, you're like, hey, like I can get this podcast episode on press. And I was like, yeah, like would I have taken you anyway? Probably, but because you seemed interesting. But then when you reached out, I was like, oh, this is for sure like a no-brainer. Like, and you knew a couple other people who were coming on, so it made sense. So yeah, I think that's a huge thing just for anybody when you are, negotiating or just trying to get your way. Come to the table with something. Yeah. And if somebody's trying to start a PR agency, like what are the common pitfalls that you see with these people? Because again, there's a lot of them right now that are trying to do something similar.
Yeah.
So yeah, what are the mistakes that you've made?
Business model, number one. What I see a lot of people do when they start their like agencies is they just try to get like the quick wins. So for example, the people that are in your DMs that say, hey, I can get you here, here, and here. Like what happens after you pay them for that one place? Mm-hmm. Nothing. The LTV is incredibly low. Yeah. So there's nothing to kind of continue to have like a continuation for the client or the experience, right? That's number one. That's a big mistake that I made early on, is thinking that the press was gonna make me a lot of money and things like that. But it's a lot of one-off transactions. And clients, like, in order to provide the best experience, I don't think you should just do one-off transactions. Like if you were just hiring us for like one article per se, let's say we get you that article. I mean, you're happy, and then you have that, and it's an ego boost for a little bit, and then what? Mm-hmm. Most people don't know what to do with it afterwards. So the best way to support the client, and that's what I kind of like, I hope these agencies kind of take into account, is provide more of a solution that's actually going to be helpful to their problem. Mm-hmm. Because you can either sell a vitamin or a painkiller, and a Forbes article is a vitamin. Yeah, it's not going to solve your problems. Yeah, you're not going to become credible overnight. And you're definitely not going to make more money just because you got on it, So, that's one of the biggest things.
So, what things are you doing to like provide continuous value, and so that way you increase the LTV of your customers?
Packages for sure. Mm-hmm. So we'll start off with essentially what they're looking for, and then we have like a continuation model. So, for example, before you can get on stage, normally you have to have at least a name. Because our PR company can only do so much if we're offering to barter. But if you're somebody that no one's heard of, I mean, not like I can't even negotiate for you, So what we'll do first is like, okay, well, we'll do like a holistic view of like, all right, well, let's get you here. Let's do this podcast. Let's do this TV spot. And then let's start focusing this and adding this to your sales, to your fulfillment, to your marketing. And that's another thing that people get wrong is people only think PR is only for awareness. Yeah. It's not. You actually can add it in your fulfillment process, in your sales process. And it helps really out a
quick.
lot.
Talk to me about that. So, what do you mean? Like, how would I add it to like my fulfillment or sales process?
So, one of the things that people don't know is that like people that are inside of your program continuously have to get sold. Mm-hmm. Just because they went 100%, through a two-call process or things like that doesn't mean that they know everything about the way that it's going to work, right? Mm-hmm. It's actually very unrealistic for somebody to get a 2-call process or even like getting nurtured and for them to still know your entire service and how it's going to work and things like that. So because we know that, there has to be continuously sell points, and not selling based off of like, upsells, but selling them on like, hey, this is the method. Hey, these clients that were literally in your exact same spot, this is what they did, and because of that, they got this result. So you're doing it based off a milestone. So for example, like, I don't know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like I think within the first 7 days, people get like buyer's remorse or they get scared, right? Yeah. So because of that, you always want to make sure that they feel comfortable moving forward. Another portion of that is like in the milestones, right? Like let's say, for example, one of the biggest probably like things that we like reconfirm all the time is like the articles. Number one, it's very hard to get an article right the first time. That's why writers have rough drafts. Nobody starts off with a final draft, right? Mm-hmm. So because of that, one of the things that we do is reinforce the belief that, hey, once we get your cooperation and we, edit it and we kind of work towards that, then it's going to lead to this, right? But in the moment, people are stuck on, well, this rough draft is not how I want it to be yet. Mm-hmm. And so what we want to do is essentially kind of like put testimonials or people here that essentially went through that process the right way and then move forward, and this is what they got. And then it just makes it easier, right?
Yeah.
Because you know your process. You know that it's a rough draft. You know that it's going to get better with editing. It's like a natural process. But they might not know that because guess what? They probably never have hired another agency before, you know? So you can use the press in that spot, right? I've done TV spots where like I'll talk about the methodology and that's part of the onboarding. You know, they watch the TV spot that I did about the methodology. So that way they can continuously get sold on the idea of what we're doing in order to get them to the place that they want to be.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think a big thing with something that you mentioned, and I'll kind of backtrack to talking about these agencies and they're doing these one-off transactions. That's just, I think a lot of business right now, and the most successful businesses understand that they have to increase LTV. They understand that they need some sort of, whether it be a subscription model or have some sort of package like you mentioned, to be able to continuously sell those people. Number one, make sure that they get value out of the product or service or whatever they have. But, you know, and that's something that we see sometimes with like the education side of things where it's like, hey, like once you're in and once you learn, like we have to, like there has to be something else that we either teach you or provide another service. Because again, those people already know, like, and trust you. And so, you know, if you're just going out always hunting and trying to prospect new business like these guys in the DMs are, it's a tough bit. It's tough. So it's just like having new things to sell that again are valuable, but then are going to help, you know, increase. So what do you think the key has been for you in being around for 7 years when these guys are kind of coming and going?
I think, you know, I love the fact that you talked about like making sure that what we send is valuable because when people in the DMs are sending like, hey, get on this publication and things like that, you have to realize the only people that are going to move forward with that are people that are looking at your services like a menu, right? Like you're just an order taker from that point.
Yeah.
So, you know, one of the biggest things that like I realized in the past 7 years is deliver. Number one, you know, we're not always going to be able to deliver every single time. Like that's incredibly unrealistic. But as long as you have a business model that essentially can deliver, like, you know, I don't want to put out percentages, but like most of the time, then you're good to go, right? And for the clients that are unhappy, like then help them out there, right? But you know, a lot of people just focus too much on one-time transactions, or you know, they promise things that they can't get. For a long time, there was this thing going on, like it was big, right? Even I was into it, where people were selling like verifications, you know, on like social media and things like that, you know? And what happens when, you know, Instagram cracks down on that or Facebook cracks down on that and you sold a ton, you know, now you're fucked. So I don't know.
That's okay. Yeah, you're good. But so really quick, I want to talk about that because like, so how would people be able to buy a verification back in the day?
Back in the day, before they made it available,
before they made it open,
it was actually very easy.
Really?
Like, you just needed to get a couple of pieces of press. It was about like 4 pieces of press. We would always do 10 just in case, and then you would submit it to a media rep, and that media rep would essentially, you know, put the stamp on it and then get you verified. And it would happen within. I mean, normally it would happen within 24, 48 hours. But the only reason there would be a delay in how long it would happen is if there was a queue. Like let's say, you know, somebody else was essentially going to get verified first, so you had to wait a few days.
And so did you have like one media rep at Meta that just...
I never had the media rep, unfortunately. I always had to go to the broker that had the media rep, and that's how I did it.
And these media reps like knew what was happening. Would you guess?
100%.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Well, you know, hey, but like it worked, and I mean, I remember getting like calls about that, but I forget how much it was. Like, how much were you charging for that at the time, if you don't mind sharing?
No, I don't mind sharing. At the time, we were charged, so it depended on what platform, but Instagram was the most expensive because that was the hardest one to do. So it was like anywhere from like $5,000 to $8,000.
Okay.
And then Facebook was like $2,000-3,000.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's not bad because like a blue check, like personally, like I pay for the blue check mark right now, like just straight to Meta.
Yeah.
But like, and it still means something, but it means way less now, I think.
Oh yeah. I mean, back in the day, dude, I paid $5,000, you know, for mine.
That's worth it, I think. Yeah.
Oh, at the time? I mean, 10 times over.
That's so funny. And so like, what does your product suite look like now?
Essentially, it's a lot of articles, TV, podcasts. Stages is like the next thing, and then ecosystem. So you know,
what does ecosystem mean?
Ecosystem is essentially you want to build a cycle of influence. So whether they look you up on Google, whether they look you up on social media, like that's actually the bare minimum. Influence doesn't happen just from like first interactions. It happens throughout the entire journey. So from before they actually schedule the call to when they're speaking with you to like the in between of like from the first call to the second call, if you have a 2-call close, then what happens afterwards, then after they join into your program, and then, you know, through the program, that's an actual ecosystem. You know, people who people struggle for all sorts of reasons. But when people see drop-offs in areas, it's because they don't have that ecosystem of like what they're trying to do.
Got it. So if I'm starting from scratch and I have zero press, like 1,000 followers on Instagram, and I'm just really trying to like grow, what would you recommend to somebody in that situation?
I would say probably don't start off with press, because press is not most people's savior. You know, it's actually not going to save them. Most people that are in that, I would say, vicinity really need to dial in like lead generation first. They need to get clients, and then they need to essentially go to fulfillment, and then they can move on towards that. But press is not gonna help them.
What would you say the minimum following or the minimum brand is required before getting into press?
I'm gonna answer that a little differently.
Yeah,
because it's not necessarily a minimum. It's the fact that they have a problem. Like the problem, and the problem can come in a few different formats. It's either they have leads and, nobody knows who they are. So it's like, it's essentially cold. So they want to essentially warm up their leads, or there's somebody that's already an established brand and they want to speak on more stages. Or they want to become more known. They want to be more of a personal brand, things like that. When they have more of that problem, that's where we can help them out with. So I don't know if I can for sure answer like what the minimum would be. I just know what not to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that makes sense. Okay, and so for your internal business, like, what's the team size look like right now? Like, tell me about that.
So we had 18 people. I let go of 4 on Tuesday.
Oof. Why?
So payroll's too high.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, you're seeing the big results with like all these big tech companies.
Yeah.
I forget who, but I think someone else just laid off like another like 1,000 employees just recently. And on like our scale, we did cut a few people, and we've made a few adjustments as well. But I think we're just seeing it like it's just the way the market's trending right now. But yeah, so payroll was high. And
I agree. I think it's across the board. You know? And it made it a little easier, but like it's always hard.
No, it's the hardest thing to do in all of business is when you have to make those types of cuts. So I agree.
And the thing that sucks is like, people, I don't know if people understand this, but like you lose money, when payroll is too high, when salary cap is too high. And, like we were losing money for like a few months, just because like payroll was incredibly expensive. So, naturally you kind of have to take a look at like, all right, well, what are we doing right now? What's realistic? And then how can we continue to, like moving forward? Because I don't want to lose money for like a year,
I agree.
So you got to make the hard decisions. And it's tough because some of these people have been with me for like 3+ years, So.
Yeah. I mean, and it's tough too with a lot of these new technologies and other things that are coming out that allow one person to do more work.
Yeah.
And the overseas talent is getting so good now with like VAs and all this stuff. So, somebody who might have been like a $5,000 a month salary, I can get it done with like 1,000 or 1,500. And it's sad, but one of my favorite lessons or things that I've learned in business is like, it's my job as, the leader of the company to protect the business. I can't protect the employees always.
Yeah.
And obviously, like part of me doing a good job of that is making sure that I'm not overhiring and I'm not like just letting people go because of, dumb reasons. But in your case and even in our case and a lot of others, sometimes you have to make adjustments to the business in order to, be around for another year, 7 years in your case, right?
100%.
So what does 2024 look like for you? Like, what are your goals?
My goals for this year is, well, primarily it's kind of like investing now. So a lot of time has been spent on my personal brand and like the business and things like that. But now I kind of want to get into like Section 8 or get into, actual, investing and things like that. Like, because, I'll be very transparent. Like for the past 7 years, I've dove into crypto, like obviously lost a lot of money in crypto and done other things like that.
Hey, Dogecoin's back, man.
Dude, kidding. Right now it seems like everything's back.
I saw like, I forgot Bitcoin like just hit its like all-time high ever. But I'm not invested, so like I can't really like speak on it. But yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people lost a lot of money in crypto for sure.
Yeah. And then right now, like my friends were like, dude, we got to get back in. I'm like, what the, like it's high right now, dude. Yeah,
that's funny. And so trying to get into like investing, as far as like the business goes, are you still like all in on the business?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think it's going to be, like as time goes on, I think things get easier. It's a lot harder, obviously, always in the beginning. But I mean, when you get bigger, you have more responsibility. But like we have great people that refer us business that are relatively big and trying to develop more partnerships there. And I don't know if I want to do the things that my clients want to do. Like I don't know if I want to be the one on stage. I don't know if I want to be doing that type of stuff.
And I don't think it's required either. Right. And it's a grind to do, right? Because we do these 4 big events every year. We call them WealthCon, right?
Yeah.
Our next one's like April 18th through the 20th. We'll have like 1,000 people, all these big speakers. But to get everybody there all the time. And then also, even if somebody's just coming in as a speaker, even if you speak once or twice, like that doesn't move the needle. You got to be going on stages, running the circuit. Like somebody who I'm a big fan of, like Pace Morby, I forget how many stages he was on last year, but it was like over 100 and something, right?
Damn.
Like that's a lot of travel. That's a lot of stuff, but it does result in, great stuff for his business. His community is one of the biggest communities out there for real estate investing. But yeah, it's tough if you really want to do it big. Yeah. So yeah, I guess, how do you feel like you're going to grow your personal brand in 2024?
Doing the same thing that I'm like doing for clients, except for the
stages.
Yeah. What we're doing instead for the stages is I'm having Jake, who's our head of enrollment, speak instead of me.
That's smart.
So yeah, and he likes doing it,
Yeah.
So, and he's a much better closer than I am, So like he'll get on stage and he'll crush it.
Yeah.
And he's learned from like Eli Wild and stuff like that. He actually works with Eli Wild too.
Oh, sweet.
So I mean, he's going to do a much better job than I am. I don't want to do it. He wants to do it. I might as well empower him to do it. So there's that. And then obviously from my end, like I don't network too much. Like I would say a hermit in that way. So I'm definitely going to network a lot more this year.
Yeah. Any events or any like networking events you're trying to get to or excited about this year?
There's only one that I actually like really, really like, and it's called GCC, Gents Croquet Club.
Oh, interesting.
I hope I didn't say that wrong.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that one. So what's the network or what do they do?
So it's essentially it's kind of like more like old money, vibes and stuff like that. And so the main guy that did the entire NFT and all that is essentially his name's Iman Ghazi.
Oh yeah, I know him.
Yeah,
or not personally, but I know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah. So he has like that group, and essentially you learn a lot about crypto, which I'm not into crypto, but they throw events, they do business masterminds, things like that, and I'm more into that because like I love Europe, I love the way that they dress, I love I love a lot of that stuff. I'm a big like American though, I'm a patriot, love Donald Trump, but I also love Europe, and so that's the only reason why I'm really excited about that one. Like the other ones is more like, and this is just a personal opinion, but they're all very similar in that sense. This one's a little bit different because it kind of has more of my vibes.
Yeah.
Smoke a cigar, you go to like in Italy, like a
super nice house on Lake Como.
Exactly.
All that type of stuff. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. So tell me about where you think like the future of media is going. Because obviously a lot of it is going online it's already been online, but it's like going on to social media with, TikTok and, just anybody can build their own brand now. So like what value do you feel like you still provide getting these people on the main publications? Or even for us, we don't spend $1 on SEO. And I know that's not necessarily like your thing,
right?
But we don't spend anything on Google. We probably should, but like improving our rankings because we know that like if you Google, Ryan Pineda, or if you Google, wealthy business, like we come up because we have put out so much content and all that stuff. So, where do you think like the future of media is going?
I think it's going to be a lot more video. Like I saw a recent study and it said like 80% of people consume, video, So I know I was talking about the VARC model, how you want to do all of it, but in all reality, that's only 20% of the way that people like to learn. Like 80% of people watch video and do that. So that's been big already for a while. But I would say it's still very much a need for a lot of people. There's people that want to become a personal brand, but they have no idea how. Like the only podcast that they do, or like probably, virtual ones that don't necessarily have too many, views or things like that. And they don't want those. They want to get bigger, and they just don't know how to do that stuff, right? And sure, you can get ChatGPT to give you an amazing pitch, but it's not going to have the connections. It's not going to have the relationships that like people like I have. Like when we were doing Brandon Dawson stuff, like there's connections that I'm not going to take anything away from him. He can get it himself.
Yeah.
But there's connections that he didn't have that we had that, we can make introductions to.
Sped things up.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big thing is you speed things up with that. Like, real quick, one thing that I love doing is paid media. A lot of people believe that just because you get organic media, that's the only way that you can do it. That's the genuine way. But it doesn't make a story less credible just because you did a paid format. And the probably the easiest way to describe this is like Cliff Brooks, who's a client of ours, he does health. Now, most people that do health and fitness, people are interested because they want to look good naked, or they want to have six-pack abs, or they want to just, whatever.
It's the only reason I work out.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Well, for him, his story's a little different. His father died at a young age because of health problems. And because of that put him on a journey to make sure that nobody else experiences the same thing that he did. So now, I mean, that's the reason I started working out is because I don't necessarily care to look good. I have my daughter, I have my, wife.
You're good.
Yeah. But I do care to be there for my daughter. I imagine how selfish I would be to not work out and not be there for my, for my 100%. Daughter.
100%.
So just because we paid for him to get into a TV spot or things like that, it doesn't make his story any less credible. It just speeds it up, right? So people have this misconception that if it's paid, it's fake. That's not true, right? When you pay for things, you speed things up. You can post on social media and get organic clients, but you can also pay Facebook to get, clients a lot quicker. So it's about speed.
I agree. And, something you bring up is something that we talk about and even we'd use with our internal strategies. It's like, obviously we're putting a lot of organic content out there, but we still spend about 150 to 300,000 a month on paid advertising. But the big thing, and I think what makes your paid advertising more effective is when you have the organic content already out there. So somebody sees your paid ad online and they click on it and they're like, oh, okay, this guy's super credible because he has, all this other content that he's created, or they go research and, they start looking for things online because it's all, like we said earlier, it's all one ecosystem. And so the more that you can have, more content that you can have out there, the better. Yeah. Right. And that's why, that's why I put out so much content too. Like I have a common name, Javi Chavez, but if you Google me, it's all my content, which is cool. You know what I mean? And it's all because of just me putting out stuff. And so, with like what changes have you seen over the last 7 years in this industry? Like tell me about what it was like when you first started.
When I first started, it was actually very easy. Like there was a big need, like nobody knew how to do it. So, I was always the go-to guy because people were like, hey, you want to get on Forbes? Like I have a guy. You want to get on Entrepreneur? I have a guy. Yeah. So it was very easy for me to get clients. And then it was easy for me to, ask these big level guys for like testimonials and things like that because again, there was really nobody else, in the space kind of doing that. So, but it was also a lot different. Like everybody believed the stuff that came out immediately from back then.
I remember back then, like I would be Googling entrepreneur. I would be reading those articles all the time now that I think about it. Yeah. Like I haven't thought about that in a long time. But yeah, I would go and I'd be so interested in like the Forbes articles and like the entrepreneur articles because that was like really the only place to consume that kind of content because no one was really on social media yet kind of posting about it. So I get that it was like, those are the glory days, man.
Yeah. when I used to hear, he got named top 10 by, this publication.
Or Forbes 30 under 30 and all that. Like, I still think that there's value to that because I think that's still kind of like cool, but I feel like it carries a little bit less weight these days.
Yeah, 100%. Now when you say like, oh, I got named X by this publication, it's like people are like, all right, you paid for that,
Exactly.
So, but back then though, you're like, what the, who said this? Like, oh shit. And the truth is they didn't say that. Contributor said it, but yeah.
That's so interesting. And so you mentioned that you said you have a daughter and a wife?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's it like being an entrepreneur and also trying to, be a father and a husband?
The father's like the best thing in the world, and people always say it's super cliche, but you don't understand it until you have one. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like, I understand. But until you have a daughter, it's insane. Or like just a kid in general. Like I love, my daughter and like she brings me joy. I can be having a rough day. And the fact that she's so excited to see me the moment I come out of my room is like, it just lights me up, So I've definitely grown a lot more like patient and a lot more understanding and a lot more, I would say just overall like what matters in life, and then, being like a husband and things like that, like that's a journey in itself too.
Yeah, of course.
And I also love her very, very much. Yeah, and like we have a great relationship. She's a stay-at-home wife. She's been like that for about a year and a half, maybe.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
And she takes care of the home life, and then I take care of the business life, and she does like whatever she wants to do, essentially. And yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's the life, man. And I think that's what a lot of people like want. So, what do you feel like motivates you? And this is a two-part question.
Yeah.
So, what motivated you when you first started, and what motivates you today?
What motivated me first is I had this like desire to just beat everybody.
Yeah.
And it was very unhealthy at the time, But like I believed that I could beat an entire marketing team. I believed that stuff, whether it's true or not.
That's what you need.
It got me through the hard stuff, But I would wear like I went to this HubSpot conference, my very first one, very first conference ever. They paid for my ticket and everything, and I wore a sweater that said "Future Millionaire." And I just walked around there with pride. I'm like, that's gonna be me one day. And now, like, I mean, I could care less about that stuff. I just don't care about that anymore. Like, I care more about quality of life. I care more about my friends. I care more about like the business, making sure like it's healthy. And I don't necessarily care to like beat so and so. Who cares? Like, there's more than enough.
Yeah.
And to me, I've also kind of grown more into like the Stoic philosophy and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of things that matter, a lot of things that don't matter, and that you give meaning to. And I'm just here for the ride.
For sure. And I think what you mentioned too is like, what matters is what you give meaning to. And I would agree 100%. Like, and it's funny because I feel like a lot of people they get to where you're at now in terms of like the thought process of like, dude, none of that stuff really matters. Like number one, there's room for everybody. Like, you don't need to be like, I'm going to step on everybody's throat and I'm way better than everybody. But like, some people need that motivation in the beginning to like get there. Right.
Well, one thing I'll say about that is like people who, this is like my favorite quote. I actually have a tattoo of a sword here.
Yeah.
But people who live by the sword die by the sword, and that's big for me. So it's like people that are constantly at war, like they constantly have a fight to fight. I mean, like, and I know people might get mad, but like they're their own worst enemy.
For sure.
They create problems that didn't need to happen. They create a culture that doesn't need to exist. They are constantly in a fight for something, right? And although you need that sometimes, like to always be at war, I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's just, maybe it's not for me.
No, I get it. But it's like, you look at people, well, I mean, I'll take like Conor McGregor, for example.
Yeah.
Right? He had this big chip on his shoulder, like, I'm going to make it. Makes it, gets rich, and then you lose the motivation. Like, there's no like, and he's at this point now in life. I don't know if you follow fighting or whatever, but he's at this point now where like, why would you ever get back in the ring, or like, why would you ever like step back in the arena when you've already made all this money, like in like specifically fighting? And I'm not comparing fighting to entrepreneurship, but like specifically fighting, like you need like that kind of mentality, because otherwise it's like, dude, like you're not going to go out there and win.
That's true.
And so I think there's a time and a place for like that kind of mentality, but in business you don't need that.
At least not all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think there's times when like, because even here, right? So one of the, like our ethos, it's called the wealthy way, right? So basically, don't go broke trying to get rich. Yeah. It's kind of like the whole tagline. But basically, like, hey, the idea that you can have it all, meaning you can be in shape, you can be like a good husband or just a good person in your community. You can have a great business, and you can still have time to like go do whatever, right? So for the longest time, Brian and the whole team, I would say most days we're usually out of here by 5.
Yeah.
So we have some sales guys upstairs who like to stay and grind and whatever. Right. Like, hey, by all means, but we don't work like. And then we're in here 8:30 to 5. But then after that, like, we're done.
I like that.
Yeah. And Ryan and I, like, we'll text, or like some of leadership will like message back and forth after hours, just because like we love what we do.
Yeah.
But we do our best, like, try to be present at home, or, again, make sure that you're like taking care of your health, your body, and all that type of stuff. So, I don't think that you need to have like this grind only mentality all the time. But to that point, there are moments, and if we're like really focused on something, there may be a day where like we'll come in and we'll stay a little late, or we'll work a little extra, but it's definitely not the norm.
Yeah. And that's natural. Like, if you're an entrepreneur, you have to do that.
100%.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, you can't, and kind of what you're saying, like, by living by the sword and dying by the sword, if you just grind all day long and for months, years, like you will get burnt out eventually. Like that's not a sustainable thing, but like we can do it the way we do it all day long.
Yeah.
Right. We come in, we're productive for the time that we're here. And then, if we weren't, like, people brag about being, man, I do 12-hour days. Like, man, if you're doing 12-hour days, you're not efficient with your day.
Yeah.
Like, that's the problem. So
you need to delegate ASAP.
You need to figure something out, man. Go hire a $5 VA.
Yeah.
So I think people. I think you should value results more so than the effort that you put in. Like, it's
100%.
like, how much? What did you get done today? I think is a better way to look at things.
Yeah.
So I guess with your existing business, you mentioned that you have how many employees now?
14.
And so how does that break up within the organization? Like, what do you like? Who does what and where?
So we have client managers, then we have a head of client managers, or head of client managers essentially. Then we have one person in ops, and then we have 2 people in sales, and then in marketing we have Jayus. I don't know how many people that is already, but we do have at least a couple people in each department.
And how do you recruit?
Well, now the easiest way is like the people that I have already also know other people. Initially, I have to find friends or things like that kind of knew people, and I hired friends of mine before.
How'd that go?
Not well. It was like one of the worst decisions I've ever made.
Yeah.
And not because, not because somebody else better than me probably could have done it, could have done it. It's just so hard, like there's never a boundary. And like when I first started out with friends, like you don't know how to you don't know how to manage a business.
Yeah.
You don't know how payroll works. You don't know how taxes work. Like you don't know how much you should pay somebody, when you need to pay them, like what things they need to work on to like be revenue generating for the business. Like there's a lot of things that you don't know when you're first starting out. And when you first start out with your friends, then it's like you're literally setting them up for failure.
100%. And because I've gone into business with my friends before and love them to death. They're still some of my best friends, but you can't hold them accountable. And like even I'm sure there were times where like I wasn't doing what I should have been doing and they can't hold me accountable.
Yeah.
And so it's so hard to like have those tough conversations. And when I was doing it, we were roommates too. So it was like there was all these different,
dude, same.
Yeah, there was all these dynamics. So it's tough. And you mentioned something like, dude, I don't think that it's you said someone better than me could have done it. Man, I've yet to hear a story where it really works where in business with your best friend or even just friends in general for a long period of time. So don't put yourself down over it by any means. And so with your salespeople, like what does their process look like? Are they just like cold outbound, like hunting people, or do you have like a lot of inbound traffic? Like tell me like what that sales process looks like.
Yeah, so they don't necessarily do the setting, but we have one SDR who essentially sets the call, but they're not setting them for the call. It's like they're doing the discovery call.
Yeah,
and then they set them up for the close, which is Jake, and then he closes it. But no, we fill up their pipeline.
Nice.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? Is it through paid? Is it through organic? Like
we have
so
we have different. All right, so
different funnels. Break it down.
So I'll kind of walk you through some of them. So I would say we're pretty decent at cold. I'll give you some examples of what we do. So one of the things that we do is like for each client that we have, if they give us testimonials, if they have a good NPS score, things like that, we'll actually go directly to like the people that follow them, and with their permission, obviously, we'll say, hey, we did this for X client, which is our client now. Like, is this something you'd be interested in? Like, I noticed that you're following them, like, and would you be interested in, what we did for here, here, here? So now we're kind of coming from a place of like, most people, when they do cold, they're like, hey, we can make you X amount of money in like 2 weeks. Are you interested? Or, hey, we just did X for John or whatever. Are you interested? It has no relevancy, right? So what we're doing instead is like, we're messaging people, and that's just one campaign. But we're messaging people that already know or follow a certain individual. That is our client that gave us testimonials and gave us high NPS.
That's smart.
And we tell them like, hey, this is what we did for them. Like, are you interested? And it's just, it opens up the door a little bit because all you really have to do is get them interested to then kind of go into your process.
Sure. That's the hardest part. The hardest part is getting like somebody to raise their hand. Once like I have faith in my sales ability or my team's sales ability to like, once they can talk to somebody, if they're qualified, they should be able to close.
Yeah.
But the hardest part is getting like you said, somebody to respond back to that DM.
Yeah.
So that's a great way. So just leading with testimonials and leading with people, like it's like almost warm prospecting, but it isn't.
Yeah.
I like that.
There's other people that like, another way is like all the people that DM you, we actually DM them back.
Yep.
So for example, like there's so many PR agencies that pitch me to get their client on something.
Mhm.
And that's very normal because traditional agencies, they just put something. Are you familiar with like Instantly or things like that?
Not really. Can you?
So Instantly is essentially a software that like mass sends out emails to people.
Got it.
So like PR agencies will do that to people that they think can get their client featured on a publication. So I write for publications, but I also have a PR agency. So every time they pitch me, we already have templates that we send out back, be like, hey, well, are you interested in paying to get this on X or whatever? So then they're like, oh, well, I'm interested now. Like how much or whatever. And then we just, put them in our process. So we have different, different ways. Yeah.
Nice. And then what does like your fulfillment team, like what does that look like?
Can you clarify?
Yeah. So I guess in terms of, so when someone signs up, like what's the next process? Like how's their onboarding essentially?
Yeah. So, one thing I learned is like, you can't just give the results to clients. You actually have to provide a great experience. So for example, like let's say you're at dinner or whatever, right? And the steak was phenomenal. Like you love the steak, you love the food, but the waiter never came to like refill your drink, or she never came to see if you're good to go, or she never came to like give you your bill. You had to ask for it. If they provide a horrible experience, but you like the steak, you're still not going to probably go back, right? Because the experience sucked. So experience plus results equals raving fan.
Yeah.
So our onboarding is one of the most important parts because they just paid, like they're excited. So you got to make sure that they, kind of go through the process. So right away is we send out a welcome email. The welcome email will get them set up into Basecamp. They'll have like a few things just for onboarding, which is, a form. They watch a few videos about our methodology, what we're excited to do for them. They schedule a call. We talk about them, and then they kind of go through that process.
Exactly. And the reason why I asked that question is because what a lot of people miss, like in business, is that onboarding step. Like they have a great sales process because they got to make money. And then when they bring them in, they kind of lose them, or like it slowly like falls off. Right.
Yeah.
So we're really big on like time to value. And that's something that we've really tried to develop over at least the last like 6 months or so. Like, how do we get this better?
Yep.
Right. So the second they sign up, they're getting their onboarding emails. We're making sure that like our team's following up with them. We have a customer success manager reaching out like, okay, like, let's make sure that you got access to the courses. Let's make sure that you have access to the calls. Oh, you're an entrepreneur and you want to grow, you want to scale. Like you need to be on this marketing call, this sales call. Like these are the things that you need to attend. Because we're at to the point now with like our coaching stuff. We have like 27 calls a week. Like it's crazy with all of our different products and services. So it's easy for people to get lost. So for us, we're like, hey, we're going to personalize it. We're going to walk you and we're going to hold your hand. You're going to get this, you're going to get this, and attend here. So, and that's like you said, that's how you get raving fans, or that's how you get people who, that's how you get the success stories. Because at least for us in the education world, like a lot of people, like they need, like some people just buy things and they never use them.
100%.
I'm sure like you might deal with that. I'm sure with PR too, because like it requires a level of like it's done with you. It's not really just done for you, right? Like they have to
They have to approve of it. They have to show up to the podcast. They have to show up to the TV spot.
Exactly. And obviously it's exciting for them because they're getting on the TV spot or whatever. So I'm sure they're like sometimes willing, but like we did a media agency for a while, like where we would have people come here and film and do the whole thing. But the biggest challenge that we ran into was getting them here. Yeah. Like people would like, again, get scared, or they would just like not want to show up for the film sessions because people would just keep pushing it back and pushing it back. So it's like the sooner that we can get them in and like collaborating, the more bought in that they are, is what we found 100%. At least. Yeah.
They want that intimacy, that engagement with the people that they're hiring.
For sure.
It's such a death when like, you buy something and like, then you don't hear from them. Then you're like, hey, like what you don't want is a client following up.
Oh yeah.
Over communication 100%. The moment they follow up, then like
something's broken.
Yeah.
100%. And so we've talked a bit about success and all that. What do you feel like has been one of your biggest business failures?
Well, there's been a couple.
That's good. That means you're trying. Yeah.
Recent or like just the biggest?
Yeah, let's just go with like the biggest and what you learned from it.
The biggest was I was doing PR wrong initially. Mm-hmm. So, I was talking a little bit before about like I'm a big advocate for paid media. However, there's a way to do paid media, there's a way not to do paid media. Yeah. So before, what I used to do is I used to pay the writers outright because I thought it was a good deal. Like if you pay me like $5,000 or whatever, right? I pay the writer $2,000. I mean, we all win. You get your article, he gets $2,000, I get $3,000. Like, we're happy family, you know? But it doesn't work like that, because the moment I pay the writer, there's now a bias involved, right? They can't genuinely write the story because of journalism ethics, right? So I can't pay them. I can't give them a gift. I can't do something for that person. And I definitely can't, I can't barter either. There's like 3 things that you can't do, but I was doing all of them. So, but I got very lucky because it was in the beginning of my journey, and I only got a slap on the wrist because
what does that look like? Who's slapping you on the wrist?
So I was getting interviewed, or I was getting investigated by journalists, by things like that. And, I don't remember now, but and I could be wrong, but I think it was I know journalists at NBC, and she was telling me hey, I'm not the only person that knows this story, the FTC can get involved, a lot of this stuff, right?
Interesting.
And I'm like, what the, I didn't go to PR school. To me, it sounds like a good deal. Yeah. And the fact that it was such normal standard back then. Yeah. So if you see something happening all the time, I mean, I'm going to take, I'm going to take part of it. And I didn't know any better. I was 18, 19,
Oh yeah.
I was just starting. So, which I'm grateful for, because imagine 7 years in, and they're not going to slap me on the wrist. Yeah.
That gets a lot more serious because you've done, worked with all these clients and all that. So how did you restructure the business model after that?
I lost a lot of friends at that time period, not because they didn't want to be my friends, but because they didn't want to get, hurt basically with what I was going to go through. So a lot of clients were calling me up, be like, "Hey man, I got to pause services. They're after you or whatever."
Yeah. Right? So were there news articles coming out about you? Or
none of them came out.
But how did other people hear about it?
Oh yeah, because journalists, what they do is they're evil, man.
They're just gonna tell everybody.
They call up everybody. They call up your clients. They call up all those types of people, and they do journalistic stuff. So they ask hey,
interesting,
what's your engagement with this person and all that type of stuff. So that's how my clients knew, and they told me.
That's tough. So how'd you pivot?
Well, I had to rebuild. Number one, I couldn't do the same thing I was doing. So for a while there was a stagnation point where I was hardly making any money. And then the best kind of just from personal experience, the best way to overcome that is not by saying anything, but it's by showcasing something after. So I waited 6 months before I said anything about the situation. And I was within those 6 months, doing it right. So I did it right for the entire 6 months. And I was like, look, when I basically came out with everything, I said, hey, I'm in it for the long run. If I would have known that this stuff was going to get me in trouble and, whatever, I would have never have done it, Of
course.
But the reality is this, and I, stated my side. And because of that, now this is what I'm doing now. And I have proof to kind of back it up. So, from that, people know, in business, you're going to get rocked. It's undoubtedly, it's inevitable.
Oh, for sure. And the crazy part about business is no entrepreneur has 100% success rate.
Yeah.
Right. Most entrepreneurs have more failed businesses than they do functioning, thriving businesses. And even less of entrepreneurs have one business that they have the exact same business model for more than maybe 5 years.
Agreed.
Yeah. So every business has to either pivot or die, or it ends and then an entrepreneur starts something else.
Yeah.
Right. So, it's number one, kudos to you for even being around for 7 years, because a lot of people don't even make it past, year 1, year 2, year 3. And obviously you've changed, your offering a little bit just to keep up with the market, which is important. But I think, like you said, I think I've said this before with entrepreneurship, but it's like riding a motorcycle. It's not if you're going to fall, it's when. Yeah. So 100%.
And some of us fall a lot. Shit. Yeah.
And that's okay. It's not, as long as you, and the other thing with failure is, as long as you're making sure that you have a way to fail in a controlled environment, meaning hey, are you, what a lot of what we do is tests. We do a lot of testing, even with our real estate business, with our coach, everything, we're slowly testing. And so that way, the failures that we do have, they're not significant enough to really make an impact on the business as a whole.
Yes.
Right. So that's something that's super important, because if you're just testing and you're taking these big bets, like the bigger the test or the bigger the bet, the bigger the failure.
Yeah.
And the key to business is just making sure that your failures don't put you out of business.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Like when I first started the stages stuff, like we failed. Like we took on 7 clients and like it took us forever to figure out the route to like essentially get them, on stage. Like it took us 2 years just to get the last 2 people.
Oh, wow.
So like, but I mean, obviously we didn't take in any more after that, but it's like I agree with you. Like you do little tests like that to see like, hey, number 1, do people want it? People wanted it. Number 2, can you deliver it and do it, for every single person? And then you figure out like, all right, well, I can't do it for this industry. I can't do it for this type of person. Like these are the people that I know we can do it for, and then kind of move forward that way. But you fail along the way.
Oh, for sure. And that's the only way you're going to learn, right? And like you said, like that's the only way that you identify like your target market, or because you can write up the most beautiful business plan, and you can like just like the way they do it like on business school, where like this is my target market and all that stuff. But the second that you actually go out there and test, like you could be totally wrong. Like instead of like this being your demographic, it might be someone else. And like you said, it's also what can I fulfill on, and what can I fulfill on at scale? Yeah. Because the difference is like, could we like help a certain client like achieve a result, but can we do that with 10?
Yeah.
Can you do it with 50? Can you do it with 100? Like, you know what I mean? So those are the challenges that we typically encounter. And I'm glad that you brought it up because it's huge. So last question. If you had to leave the earth tomorrow, what's one thing that you'd want people to know?
Whether people like know about me or people don't know about me, or anything, I would say probably the only people that I would care to have, any thoughts about me would be my daughter, my wife, and my like immediate family. I'm not trying to make a mark for anybody else.
And what would you say to them?
I'm not sure. Not sure, but yeah.
Got it. Cool, man. Well, where can people find out more about you?
You can find me on social media at Ulysses, or my website, influencerpress.com. Thank you.
Love it.